Welcome, everybody. This is the Viva Connections SharePoint Framework bi-weekly sync. It is January 13th, 2022. It is not luckily Friday. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager in the Microsoft 365 platform side, responsible of some of the open source and community assets. And typically this call is actually hosted by Patrick Rogers, but he has some family errands and surprises this morning. So I stepped in on that. That's why we work as a team, which is great. Now, today we'll have again a full agenda. So we'll do a quick update on what's happening on the SharePoint Framework side of the house. There is actually some few updates on that as well. And then we'll have an update on what's happening in our open source projects. So PnP JS CLI, reusable PnP SPFX controls. And we'll talk about what are the new community samples contributed within past 2 weeks related on SharePoint Framework extensibility or ACES extensibility for Viva Connection. And then we'll have 3 demos today. So Siddharth, Paolo, and Hugo are going to have demos after that. Now, quick recap on some of the slides, which we are always repeating in here. Fair feedback from Julie as well. We talked about this one before we started. But there are multiple ways of getting involved in our community. And the key point here is that please let us know how we can improve the community. First of all, if you want to do a demo, let us know, reach out. You can use the form. We actually reached out to all of the people who have submitted a request to do a demo on that form just today. So there's our community leads, in this case, Louisa Fries, is actually contacting all of the people and get them queued up. You can also contribute in any of our GitHub repositories or provide feedback, which is the most important thing. If nothing else, let us know what works and what doesn't work in the chat of these community calls, and we can gradually start reacting all of that stuff. That is the key point for Microsoft as well. Now, if you think about all of the different assets which we provide you to get started or to improve your existing skills in the Microsoft 365 platform, we have 2 different YouTube channels. So we have the official Microsoft 365 developer video channel, where we have videos which are coming mainly from marketing and also from our cloud advocates. Then we have our Microsoft 365 community video channels, where we have all of the community call recordings and all of the demos from these community calls and many other videos from the community members as well. We have a lot of open source assets available. And as it's hard every now and then to find those individual samples from GitHub directly, we have different set of sample galleries, which will make it easier for you to find the relevant sample for you. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one from where you can access all of these assets, which is AKMS M365 PnP. And that's, well, I should actually update the picture. The PnP, by the way, the term where we talked about this one a few times already, but I'm going to shuffle that on 20 seconds because somebody got confused. In that site, we call this as a Microsoft 365 platform community, and that's what the PnP is just a nickname on. So we are moving more away on using just the Microsoft 365 platform community as the term in the future. You'll see that more and more in our messaging. Now, in the Microsoft 365 platform side of the house, we do have another weekly community call, which is happening on every single Tuesday. And this is a community call where we have Microsoft employees, so engineering people, cloud advocates, PMs, and so on, doing live demos on different capabilities. So every single Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, this call is happening, and it typically has 3 different demos and also updates on the Microsoft side on what's happening across the Microsoft 365 platform. Last Tuesday, by the way, did all-time highest record on that one, so 296 attendees, which was really cool. Cool to see the high demand on that. Next week, we'll have Dan Wallin talking about show user emails in my ASP.NET Core app in Microsoft Graph. We have Patrick Rogers jumping in to deep dive on the Viva Connection adaptive card extension development, and Sebastian Levert is going to cover yet another Microsoft Graph toolkit control, which are super cool demos as well. So he walks through, there's a series of these demos where he walks through individual capabilities in the Microsoft Graph toolkit. Now, on the following slide, I will directly throw it to David. David, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Vesa. Well, friends, you're going to see a number of opportunities that you're able to reach out, be part of the community, contribute back to the community, but we understand there may be some hurdles that prevent you from getting involved to the level that you'd like to. For example, Perhaps you'd like to contribute a sample or present on a demo, but you're not quite sure how and where to get started. Well, these Sharing is Caring sessions are live hands-on sessions that will guide you through how to do things like your first GitHub pull request, or some guidance on presenting within the community, or you might want to buddy up with someone in the community or a member of the PnP team, and we are here to support you in that. aka.ms/sharing is caring. They're all free, safe space opportunities, not recorded. And of course, we have our ever popular AMAs. We had one just a couple days ago on PnP Modern Search. We've got some coming up on PnP React Controls February 22nd with Alex Terentiev and Joel Rodriguez, and then Graph and MGT with Sebastian Levert. Again, this program is provided to give you assistance, hands-on, get you involved in many, many ways. We look forward to you getting more involved and want to help you. So aka.ms/sharing is caring. Now, once you have contributed, we want to celebrate you. The year has just turned to 2022, and we have a whole host of recognition opportunities to ensure that you are celebrated and recognized for the work that you're doing. This is a program that we are working directly with Credly, the same Credly that manages the certificates and certifications for Microsoft and the badges associated to that. So we want to recognize you in the same way. They can be attached to your LinkedIn, shared out, put on your blogs, many, many ways. You do need to opt in so that we can tie your information to your GitHub account and other ways in which you contribute, like blog authoring, script samples. All those are coming more. A lot of fun campaigns to get you involved. Limited edition badges with our favorite Parker. So we'd love to see you get more celebrated. aka.ms/m365pnp-recognition. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent, thank you, David, on that one. Now let's move on the agenda of today, because we do have quite a cool demos coming up as well. So quick update on the SharePoint framework side of the house. So few updates in here. And this is a relatively new thing for those, if you are a partner building an extensibility for Microsoft 365, we actually have an updated ISV Benefit program, which you probably want to check out if you're falling into this category. So we as Microsoft, we are providing different kind of benefits if you are building extensibility for Microsoft 365. And this used to be all about Microsoft Teams. Now it's all about Microsoft Teams plus Microsoft Viva extensibility. And Microsoft Viva extensibility includes Microsoft Viva Connection extensibility, which includes SharePoint frameworks, just to be clear on that. So if you are building extensibility or solutions with those technologies, you probably want to check out this opportunity for getting benefits, basically free Azure credits and a few promotions from Microsoft Marketing, which is a great opportunity for you to take advantage. Now, a few other things on the SharePoint framework side of the house. It's always interesting. So I obviously, because I work in the engineering, I'm the principal PM on the platform side of the house, I can get access on all of the data. And what the number one, the most highest usage all time of SharePoint framework on the daily usage is Tuesday this week. Actually, funny enough, on Monday, I was so excited that we broke the all-time record that I already did some social media tweeting on that one, but then on Tuesday, we broke even the Monday. So it's pretty cool to see the growth, what we have on SharePoint framework. So right now already we have tens of millions of monthly active users for custom SharePoint framework components, which are being used in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, or in SharePoint. And if we think about the growth, since January 2019, the growth is just out of this world. So it's plus 686%, which is mind-boggling, and which you can see actually from the chart as well. Even though the exact numbers are not visible, because I don't have permissions to show those, but you can see the relative growth between the different years and sequence. Now, on the SharePoint framework side of the house, a bit disappointed on the 1.14. It is a bit delayed. So 1.14 is currently planned to get released. Maybe I can actually say this. We're planning to get it released on the Valentine's Day, which is 14th of February, which is the Monday on the second, well, it's second, I guess it's second Monday of February then, but it's Monday, 14th of February. And that is the target date for 1.14. We're looking into doing a beta release, one more beta pre-release, and then a release candidate release. The beta is coming most likely next week, and then a release candidate release before then, and then actual GA release of 1.14 in the Valentine's Day to give you some sort of a Valentine's Day gift. In here, most likely the biggest thing what is visible is the new Yeoman template. So basically outputs from the projects are a bit different, and there's some modifications on optimizations in the Yeoman generator. So we're getting rid of additional questions and all of that stuff to simplify the process. And then there's a lot of further development in here. Our development team is actually getting duplicated pretty much from a resources perspective for SPFX, which is awesome internally. So there's a lot of new investments on this platform related on SharePoint Framework, especially on Viva and Team side of the house, but of course not forgetting about SharePoint, because SharePoint is the backend behind Microsoft Teams and Viva Connection. So even though you wouldn't necessarily always understand that, but the SharePoint is behind the scenes. Now, let's move in then into the PnP JS side of the house. I think, Julie, you'll be covering the latest on this one.
Yep, I will be, and I don't actually have much to report since the last time. Patrick and I, as just two people with full-time jobs, have been putting all of our efforts in the version 3 updates. And we're getting really, really close. We're just down to documentation, getting all of that ready to go so that it is fully comprehensible to everyone to do the upgrade from V2 to V3 and have all the documentation they need. So we're focused on that. We didn't have a lot that we would need to do to V2 right now anyway. We're just answering support issues, but if you need anything, obviously, drop your issues in the issues list in our repo. And as always, follow us, M365 PnPJS on Twitter. And that is pretty much all I have for this time.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Julie. That one, I'm just watching all of the animation. That is really cool animation, by the way. So a lot of stuff happening on the slides. It's getting pretty overwhelming from an animation perspective. Cool. Let's move in then on the CLI for Microsoft 365 side of the house and quickly looking on the attendees. So it's probably me covering this one, so no problems. So latest version is version 1.4.3. So the CLI for Microsoft 365, if you're using it and if you're tracking always what's the latest and greatest, this project has a really great and active social media presence. So please subscribe on the @CLI Microsoft 365 to stay up to date on that. In the 4.3 version, the latest capabilities are upgrading our SharePoint Framework solution projects to 1.14, the beta version. If you want to test out your solution, how they will be working with 1.14, there isn't really massive, let's say, breaking or significant changes on, definitely not breaking changes, but there's no significant changes there when you're upgrading from existing solutions. So that should not be a problem. And then a lot of other new commands there as well. Now, moving on the projects, SharePoint Framework reusable components in this side of the house. And the latest version on React controls is 3.5, which has the SharePoint Framework 1.13.1 or 0 support. So they're basically aligned on the latest version. So this is basically needed because there's a React dependencies and all of that, making sure that everything is aligned properly. And then on the property controls, the 3.3 is the latest one. And the latest development here is related on the taxonomy control improvements. So there's a constant feed of new capabilities in these controls as well. Have a look on the URLs which are provided on the slide. Now on the PnP Modern Search, not a significantly new things in here. So the latest version is 4.5.3, which is the December release, and the new version is queued up already, so it's coming up also quite soon. There's a lot of excitement actually with the 4.x release related on the Modern Search web part, and we just did quite a few community call demos on this. So please have a look on the YouTube channel if you're looking into doing Modern Search capabilities. It's awesome stuff which is available for you to take advantage. Now, let's then move to the PnP SPFX samples. It's Hugo.
Thank you, Vesa. So we have a few sample repositories, but two of them that I'm going to be talking to you about are the SPFX extension sample repository and the SPFX web part sample repositories. So those are open source samples that are contributed by the community. They consist of sometimes just simple concepts, sometimes they're full-on solutions that you can use to learn how to code and to, frankly, get inspired sometimes. That's definitely what I do. These are the latest samples of over the last 2 weeks. On the extension side, we don't have any new updates, but on the web part side, boy, do we have some new stuff. So we've got an update to the property control by Jonah. where he's updated. This is probably one of the oldest samples. It was originally created by Chris Kent. It's been updated now to SPFX 113. Yves Abersat has updated both the quotes web part and the My Teams web part. He's upgraded them to SPFX 113.1, and that was kind of his holiday challenge contribution, so thank you for doing that. The list search web part by Alberto Gutierrez Perez has been upgraded also to SPFX 113. And then we have a new drag and drop web part, the drag and drop followed sites by Adam Wojcik, who can actually, drag and drop some sites in a grid to actually decide which sites you want to follow. Abderrahman Mujahid has updated the advanced page properties to add date, time, number, and currency formatting based on the current user's locale. And then finally, Andre has updated the graph because it wasn't returning files anymore, and he's updated the query so that it does not allow files of a size of 0 bytes. And that's pretty much it for today. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions, and I look forward to seeing more contributions from everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Hugo, on that one. Let's move to David around the ACEs. So Viva Connection Adaptive Card Extensibility.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Vesa. We've got 2 fantastic samples that were contributed this last week. My emails from Siddharth, who is actually presenting today, but he'll be not presenting on this, on something else. We'll get him on a presentation for this particular ACE here in the next coming weeks. And then we also have my groups from Mandeep, both fantastic samples. You'll be able to take advantage of them. We're processing them right now. We are open for more contributions. We have a few more in the pipeline we'll be processing. And of course, we're building up on the Getting Started with Adaptive Card Extensions Sharing is Caring session. It's going to be a 2-part session that we're excited to get everyone involved with to get you building those adaptive card extensions. So keep up. Again, thank you for all the fantastic work. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that one. And then we'll do the ever popular Together mode picture for those who are willing to enable the video. And I will actually start the recording already, but let's not do hand waving again. I will move the video in here so you can actually see what we're recording. And let's wait for the 50 people limit to hit. And then after that, we'll go to the demos. A few more seats available. Always takes a while to get to the Together mode. I can see a lot of familiar faces on the screen, which is great. This is always awesome. Still few seats available. I'm not going to enable my video so we can get this in bright screen resolution. Few more seats are we full. I guess we are filling in the 50 seats in there. Let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here. Awesome to have you in the call. Great, and awesome and growing community. Thank you for helping us on building better Microsoft 365 platform. Awesome, really cool. Thank you for that. So let me actually get that one away from here. And then we are a few minutes behind of the schedule, which is not that big of a deal at this point. But let's start with Siddharth around building Emoji Rating Web part with SharePoint Framework. Siddharth, take it away.
Thanks, Vesa. Let me share my screen. Thank you, Vesa. So today I will be presenting an SPFX sample web part for collecting emoji-based reaction or feedback. Little bit about myself. I'm Siddharth Vagasia. I'm Microsoft MVP and independent consultant. These are some of the social handles through which you would be able to connect with me. This is the link to the repo to this web part. If you wanted to use this web part, there's a documentation around on how to use it, etc. So let's start with the driving factor. Okay, and we all know how feedback is important, right? Be a positive or negative. So what I have seen was we have public news which are there on the news site or the public blog post or articles which we have, wherein I have seen an emoji-based feedback which we will see at the down of the page where people can basically react to that particular news or articles. So I thought of, what if we can build something similar which can be used by the organization who are using Microsoft 365 and publishing their internal news as in news in the organization. What if we can build something similar and collect employees or users feedback as an emoji reaction on this news and everything, right? So, but this web part is not just limited to news. It's basically an SPFX web part. So what we can do is we can use this web part on wiki articles if we have a knowledge base to basically collect the user feedback on a particular knowledge base. And also it can be used in the blog post if you are having an internal blog on SharePoint, right? So basically this kind of web part would allow us to get the reaction of the news or articles within our organization itself, and it can be deployed as an SPFX web part. Let's see some of the features. So the web part will allow you to basically configure the header text, the rating text, and the images which you can use. Basically, you can use different kind of emojis which you wanted to use, which are configurable as a web part property. We can choose the rating from basically 1 rating to maximum 5 ratings. So it means if you want a feedback rating based on just 1, 2, and 3, that also can be done. There is a configurable option to show the total count of the rating which user has given on a particular news as a badge. Then there is an also configurable option wherein we can choose whether you want allowed to add comment while they are providing the feedback, and this can be disabled also if you just want a pure emoji based web part. It will also display current users rating selection. If I would have already rated a particular news or an article, it would display that, okay, I have rated this by having a highlighted background. It does also have an update way to change the rating. All of this rating would be stored as in SharePoint list, and to make it more usable, there is an option in the web part configuration and the web part property configuration thing, wherein we can basically create the list on the flies where we wanted to choose the list we wanted to create, and then that list can be configured as in the web part property where the whole rating data should be stored. And there is an also option to for the admin to basically choose the background color. So these are some of the features. So let's quickly see the demo. So consider this is the news or an article, news of an organization. What I have added that web part. So this is how the web part would look like. And as of now, my logged in user would have already reacted to this particular news. So I can see the color in the highlighted thing. And we can also see how many people have basically selected a particular rating for this particular news or for this particular page. So all this data is dependent on the page name. It means the data is stored against the page name, and based on that page name, the data would be filtered and would be displayed here. And there's an option to basically add comment to it and then submit the feedback again to update the feedback. So now let's see the property windows. So from here, basically, we would be able to choose where we wanted to store the rating data. If we basically are kind of using the same web part at multiple places in the single site, it will allow you to basically choose the list, and which would be configurable. Using this button, it will automatically create a new list based on the list name which we have provided. If at all we wanted to, if you are using it for the first time and we just wanted to dynamically create the list, then this is the rating text, which would basically, we would be able to configure the text which is displayed on the top of the web part. And from here, we would have property collection, property field collection data, wherein we would be able to choose what should be the titles of each rating which we wanted to do. So basically, it will allow us to configure the titles of the rating. And it will also allow us to set the emoji or the image which we wanted to use while we wanted to display as a part of the feedback collection. So here, as I said, you can either choose from 1 to 5. You can either put, if you want 3 rating system, just configure 3 rating system, and it will automatically only put the 3 ratings images in the web part, right? Then there is an option to enable and disable comment. There is an also option to enable and disable count. And we can also choose to basically configure the background color of the web part, right? Now, to make this more usable, like we would know that whenever a news has been created, it might be created by some content team or probably somebody who would be handling the news and everything. I thought of, having this an automation wherein as soon as a news has been created, we should be able to add that news into the web part, right? So my friend Kunj helped me write and Power Automate, through which once we will basically able to whenever we add a new web part or a new news post, okay, it will basically automatically add this web part onto that page, so that the actual content writer don't have to go and configure this web part every time we wanted to do it. So let's quickly see that demo. I'll just use any blank page. And I'll just post this thing. So this flow basically is using the SharePoint REST API to when an item is been created or modified on that particular page library, where we are first seeing that if the current page is been a news page or not. The promoted state is either news. Then check out the page and get the web part ID. The web part ID we would be able to see from the web part manifest file. Then what it will do, it will basically compose a variable where it will concatenate the current web part page properties which we have and add the web part properties which we wanted to as a part of configuration by basically adding that particular web part into that page. And then it again saves the page and then it's published the page. Now, so consider this automation can be done wherein as soon as a news is been published, we would be able to automatically add this web part. This can be done other ways also, but it's just that the whole use case which I was trying to demonstrate would be incomplete if we don't have automation in place, because whenever a news is being created, we don't expect the content writer to basically go and add this web part to the page, right? Now let's quickly see if the web part would have been added here. It is not yet. Probably it might take time. While we are waiting for that, what I'll do is let's quickly see the code walkthrough. So it is a typical SPFX web part which we have built. Now in the property pane configuration, we are using SPFX reusable property pane controls to basically get different types of configuration which we wanted to create. We are using property field data collection with the title and the image URL to store the emoji images and the emoji titles or the rating titles which we have. And then the other properties like enabling count and comments and everything, right? For list creation, basically we are using PnP for all the REST operation, PnP.js for all the REST operation which we have. And for that, I have created an SP service, a provider class, wherein we have all the methods which we have to use while basically interacting with the SharePoint. So starting with get items, will basically get all the items from the particular list. The get rating, this method is not used. This method is used. It will basically get all the rating list items from that particular list. The add rating item method would be used whenever whenever the user would be rating on a particular item, and the request object would have the page name, the rating which user has selected, and the user who has given the rating, right? And same way we have update. So this is typically CRUD operation on that particular SharePoint list which we would be doing. And this is the create list with column method, which will basically check whether the same name list already exists or not. If it exists, it won't create, but it will display some error message. If not, it will create it once the user clicks on it, right? Now, coming to the component, what we have is in the render method, the typical user interface which we create, we are using PnP placeholder control to basically allow user to configure if the property are not been set. Then there is an div which displays the rating text on the top, which is basically the header text. And then using the emoji collection property, field property collection data, we are looping through it and we are creating the badge is enabled. It means if the count is enabled, then only we are creating the badge. Otherwise, we are just simply using the displaying the rating images which user would have selected. And below that, we would be displaying the rating title, right? And if the comment is enabled, we have a text field which will basically capture the user's comment and add it in the SharePoint list, right? And then on the button click, we have a submit rating, which basically calls the SP service provider methods. This is the logic where we are basically using the indexes of the column, because we have a 5 rating index mechanism which we have. So the columns are fixed like rating 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. but the user can use any text which we wanted to store. So to do that dynamism, what we are using the switch index, wherein we are selecting the indexes and everything, and basically making that rating field dynamic in the nature, right? And then the page name to be stored. And then a typical method wherein we are adding the rate item, and if it is successful, we just display a dialog saying that your rating has been successfully submitted, etc. So this is the typical code walkthrough. I mean, typically, in a way, the operations are simple, which we are doing in the SharePoint thing. Let's quickly see if the automation has worked correctly. I hope so. It has not. It has not. Probably it might have failed or something. But we have this thing in place wherein we are, once a user creates a news, the web part will be automatically added. We are planning to write a blog post also. So this like how to automate this thing, which we would share later on the social media. And the last point which I wanted to cover is the SharePoint list schema which we have, which is very simple in nature. We have title of the user, current logged in user, the page name, the user who has added the rating. So we are storing the email address to have the uniqueness. And then we have the columns like rating 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the comment which we have done. So yeah, all the data has been stored here and basically been captured in the rating way we wanted to do it. And if anything we wanted to update here as in comment, what it will do, it will basically update the rating, and it will also change the rating to that particular item which we have selected. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thanks, Vesa, and over to you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Really cool stuff and super clean implementation. And don't worry about the small demo hiccup there, but it's great to see that automation thinking behind the scenes as well. It's all about the inspiration as well for the community. But let's then move into Paulo's site. And Paulo is going to talk about SharePoint Framework Adaptive Card Extension implementation for Viva Connections. So Paulo, we can see the screen. Take it away.
Thank you, Vesa. Yes, today we keep on talking about how to develop adaptive card extensions with the SharePoint framework. And specifically today, we will cover how we can manage state and properties while developing ACEs with SPFX. So like always, few words about the topic by itself with the help of a few slides, and then I will move to some demos. So whenever we create adaptive card extensions for Microsoft Viva Connections in SharePoint Framework, we can manage properties and state like we can do with whatever kind of React component. And specifically, we can manage the properties either using a property pane, a configurable property pane, like we do for web parts, or we can manage properties values via code. As well as we can manage the state of the component in code. Whenever we define an adaptive card extension, we can declare the interfaces defining the layout of both the properties interface and of the state interface, which will be managed inside the adaptive card extension, but which will also become available in all of the card views and quick views related to the adaptive card extension in which we are. Just as a reminder, whenever you create an adaptive card extension, the UI is based on two different flavors of cards. There are the card views and the quick views. The card views are really simple, and you can have a look to the previous demo we did a couple of weeks ago. And the quick views are more complex based on adaptive card JSON. Regardless of the flavor of card you want to create inside an adaptive card extension, you can always manage and get access to the properties and state defined in the extension type declaring the adaptive card extension. And once you have the state and properties in your card, you can then use those objects and the properties of those objects as the source for data binding, for example, in the UI, as we will see in one of the upcoming demos in the upcoming SIG calls, as well as you can provide custom logic inside your cards based on the state and the properties of the adaptive card extension component. So that said, let me move to the demo environment and let's see how we can play with state and properties in ACES. And first of all, I'm going to show you a fresh new adaptive card extension that I just created using the UMR generator for SharePoint Framework, because I want to highlight you some excerpts of code. So for example, whenever we generate an adaptive card extension, we know that we have the adaptive card extension type, and in the declaration, in the definition of the type, we extend the base adaptive card extension, including an interface definition for the properties and one for the state. As you can notice here, those two interfaces are defined with the export keyword, and inside these interfaces, we simply define the properties that we want to have to configure the adaptive card extension and the state that we want to use to manage the current state of the component. Talking about the properties, it is interesting to notice that the properties are manageable through the property pane, but in the design of the adaptive card extensions, the auto-generated code relies on the load property pane resources method in order to get the property pane structure from an external TypeScript file, like this one, for example, in which we can see we have the I would say, well-known structure that we use whenever we create a SharePoint framework web part, even if right here in the auto-generated code, we have an isolated file for the definition of the get property pane configuration method. But here we can simply recognize all of the code that we are used to using whenever we create a SharePoint framework web part in order to manage the fields, to edit, to let the users edit the values of the properties. Like, for example, here title, icon property, and description are the three pre-generated properties generated by the scaffolding tool, and those map to the properties that we have in this state. Then when we move to the card views and quick views, either generated by the scaffolding tool or manually created by ourselves, we can see that, for example, in the card view, we get the definition of the import of those interfaces from the file defining and from the type defining the adaptive card extension component, and that's why the state and properties are defined as exportable. And here we simply inherit from the base type, and we refer to the properties and state interfaces that we define in the extension file. As such, we can then use those interfaces as the type of the properties property of this object referring to the card view, as well as we can access with the same technique also the state. And for example, if we go to the quick view auto-generated for this project, we can see that we can, of course, still use the same logic. So we have the interface for the properties and for the state imported in this file and used in the definition of our quick view. And we can always say this dot property or this dot state, and we can access the properties and state of the adaptive card extension. And this is really useful because when we do that, then we can use the properties and state as the content or to create the content that we want to data bind in the UI of our adaptive card extensions. Now I'm already running this project, so if I will quickly switch to the workbench, let me refresh this page. I hope the zoom is good enough. Here we have the really simple adaptive card extension just generated with the scaffolding tool, and we can see that we have the property pane I was talking about just a few seconds ago, which has been generated based on the fields that we've defined. And of course, you can create your own property pane and make your properties configurable. Now, talking about something a bit more deep or interesting about properties and state, I have another example that I want to share with you. So first of all, let me stop this one and let me switch to another example. Here we can see an adaptive card extension that I created just for the sake of explaining how specifically state and properties work in ACES. And here we have an adaptive card extension with a state with a time property of type string. In this adaptive card extension, in the onInit method, I simply rely on the set interval of JavaScript to invoke every second a function which will get the current time and will show the current time. So as you can imply from the name, and let me in the meantime start this project so that you can save some time. Gulp serve, no browser. Okay, but this will be an adaptive card extension to show the current time. So really simple, just for the sake of explaining you something. Now, what is interesting to notice is that when we do that, and when we have such an adaptive card extension, and we set in the state of the component the current time, and we do that every second, then in the card view we can rely on the state.time property here, as well as we can do the same in the quick view, and we can bind the current time in the UI of the quick view. Now, if I will go back to the workbench, and in the meantime, hopefully the project will be running, hopefully, but not yet. I don't see the reload warning or information here, but let me try still to refresh the page and see if we can already add it to the workbench. Let's see if I'm lucky. Come on. Still working. What I want to show you is that based on the architecture of the adaptive card extensions, and thinking about the fact, and now we are ready, we should be ready, and thinking about the scope and the idea behind the scene of building adaptive card extensions, when you create an adaptive card extension, the card view and the quick view of the adaptive card extension will be showed to the UI and to the user just once per time. So if I go here and I add my clock ace, we can see if I go to preview that we have the current time in my time zone right now. And if I click on the quick view, I will see the current time in the quick view. But as you can notice, the time will not be updated in the backing card view, because the logic behind the scene of the adaptive card extension is keeping track of which is the component in foreground right now, and will keep the properties and the state up to date just for that one, just to save resources, which is a reasonable behavior if you think about that. But you need to be aware of this behavior when you work with this kind of properties and state in your adaptive card extension. One last thing that I want to share with you, and then I can give the screen back to Vesa or to Hugo actually, is that when you do that, when you define properties and state, and specifically now properties in your adaptive card extension, you can also, for example, think about using the properties in order to hold a reference to useful functions that you want to make available to the cards that you have in your adaptive card extension solution. So here, for example, this is a solution which we already saw in a previous SIG call, just as an overview, and we will dig into this one in one of the upcoming episodes. But right now, with this adaptive card extension, we can manage a list of orders through the Viva Connections UI. This is the mobile preview of the Viva Connection dashboard on my tenant. And for example, I can see a list of orders, and I can eventually edit orders, or I can add new orders to the list of orders that I can manage through this adaptive card extension. Well, what is interesting here is that in the properties, I also defined the functions to load, add, update, or delete orders, so that when I am in, for example, a quick view like this one, the add order quick view, I can always rely on these properties dot the name of the function that I want to use, and having defined the mapping between these properties and the actual implementation in my adaptive card extension, I can also create, in my opinion, a good way of managing your code base, having a centralized place like the adaptive card extension component where you define all of the functions. And then you can simply rely on those functions in all of the other cards and quick views that you have, simply relying on the function properties defined in the properties interface. And I think that's all for me for today. So back to you, Vesa, and thank you.
Awesome, Paolo. Thank you. Really, really great stuff and great demo on the concepts to understand how ACs can be implemented. The ACs, just to kind of a recap, I think Paolo said it many, many times, but just to recap for those who are still wondering what are those, but their intention on the adaptive card extensions for Viva Connection is that you're able to build your own company mobile portal. So you can design your mobile experience, which can be then extended. You can surface the company information for first-line workers who only have a mobile device, not necessarily sitting right next to desktop device all the time. Now, next on the demo queue, we have Hugo, and I don't know what you're going to show today. So this is interesting. Something related on design patterns, right?
Well, I guess I have to show something about design patterns now. But thank you, Vesa. All right.
You're welcome. We can see the screen. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. So this series of calls, right? It's about, we call them the SPFX design series or design patterns, sorry. The whole idea here is how can we make every single developer a designer? And or maybe the better way to say it is how can we make every single developer, whether they're building solutions for web parts, Teams apps, or Viva Connections, how can they do it and they look awesome without having to be a designer, right? And that's really what these sessions are about. So yes, we do talk about some of the code, but we also talk about some of the design ideas behind the scenes. So this is the third session that we've done about custom properties, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. My name is Hugo Bernier. I'm a cloud solution architect. I'm also the world's laziest developer. And some of the things that I'll show you today also, I think, demonstrate some of these lazy concepts. All right, so like I said, this is the third time we've been talking about web part properties and property panes. And, you know, web part properties and property panes is how you allow your users to configure your web parts, your Teams apps, and your Viva adaptive cards. But you might be asking, well, Hugo, like, why are we spending so much time on design patterns for properties and property panes when most users who aren't owners or administrators will probably never get to see the property pane? And that's a very good point, but think about it, right? Properties is really how you can go from designing a single-use component to something that is versatile, right? That can be used in many, many scenarios. And this is where the being lazy part pays off, because you can actually use the same code to do a lot of things with a single solution. Let's use an example. Just take the quick links web part, for example, and you can use that same web part by changing a few properties like the layout property. You can use it many different ways. The SharePoint lookbook, which we have examples here, is a great example of using quick links in different ways to achieve different designs. In fact, let me show you. We got some here, and we got a few more samples here, and a few more here, right? Lots of variations of the exact same web part with the exact same code, but it just renders it in a different way, and it achieves very different look and feel. How to do that behind the scenes is, you know, with this configuration option where you can pick the layout, and depending on the layout that you pick, for example, the button layout or the list layout, you see that you get actually different choices. So the button layout has the option to pick what type of icon, but the list layout does not do that. It actually only allows you to pick show descriptions. And the icon or the tiles one allows you to pick the size of the icon. So that's interesting. But why would you design a web part property to do that? Remember our friends Hick and Hyman, right? We talked about them a little while ago. They're psychologists who came up with kind of they found a relationship between the number of choices present and a person's reaction time to that given number of choice. So the more things we have to choose from, the longer it takes for us to make a decision. And it's almost exponential. So when you bombard your users with too many choices at once, they have to take the time and they have to take, exponentially more time to look at all the choices that are available and giving them more work that they don't want. And that's one of the reasons why people, who are not in IT, people don't like computers, because computers make them feel stupid. They're like, oh, there's too many choices. All I want is a display list of links, right? I don't really want to have to pick 72 choices. And that's what we're going to try to talk about today, is how can we build these relationships where I only need to show the number of choices that are relevant to the user at the time that they've selected it. This is a concept in user experience design that's called progressive disclosure. We progressively disclose more information or more choices as the user indicates they want to see more. Let's show you an example of a web part that I built, which should look pretty familiar because it's pretty much an exact copy of the quick links web part, right? And I do the exact same options that they have, more or less anyways. And by the way, all this code for all these web parts is going to be, I'm going to merge the PR to put that in the sample gallery. So you're going to have all these samples for all the design sessions that we've talked so far. But let's talk about how we do that in code. If you remember correctly, in the web part code, we have a method called getPropertyPane configuration. And the getPropertyPane configuration, its job is to return kind of an object, an iPropertyPane configuration that contains pages and groups and fields. So the first thing is a group called layout options, which is the one that you saw at the top. And then what I pass here is I pass a property pane choice group, which is those buttons that you saw. And then I just kind of design a button for every choice. Now, one thing I want to point out here, well, there's a few things I want to point out. The first thing that I should point out is just for legibility, to make it easier to read the code for this demo, I'm using words like compact, film strip, grid, and so on and so forth. You probably wouldn't want to do that in the code behind the scenes. In fact, if you open the web part, what is it called? The workbench, and you drop Microsoft's Quick Link web part, and you look at the show data link, it'll actually show you the data that the web part is storing. And you'll notice that behind the scenes, they're actually storing numbers, not words. But again, I didn't want the code to be boring or more boring than it is right now by having to interpret numbers. So if you see text, just forgive me for not necessarily being cool about it. All right, so what we do is we store an attribute called layout, and we make that choice, right? But then here's the thing, is we also add all the fields that we needed, like, for example, do I show an image and a layout, and so on and so forth. We just do one little thing that's kind of sneaky here. We actually do a conditional AND method, where we say if the layout that's currently selected is the compact layout, then give me a property pane toggle. And we do the same thing for the film strip. And we do the same thing for all the other things. Now, sometimes we have more complicated if conditions, right? Like this one where we do an OR, right? So if it's a button or a list, then show the description. Otherwise, don't show the description. And then at the end, this is what we do here. And at the end, we get kind of the results we've just talked about. Now, here's a little problem, though. And there's a few things that you may have noticed from this. The first thing, take a look at the space that shows up, see, like right there. That space, that's not in the original web part. Why is that? Well, I kind of think it's a bug personally. The property pane control tends to render every array item, whether the array is empty or not, or the array node is empty or not, it renders it with a space. So the method that I just showed you, it works if you have a few choices, and it works if it's probably like the last item. But if you don't want that ugly space, we probably have to think of a different approach. And I don't know, I always do this. David probably laughing now because I'm always trying to use the zoom it function to highlight stuff. So this is what the controls are rendered. Now, if you look at Microsoft's version of it, where they do the same thing, there's no ugly space. And they actually, if you look at the code behind the scenes, right, if I can show that, you'll see that it doesn't have like 72 empty spaces. So how are we doing that in code? Well, if you remember, again, the get property pane configuration returns an iPropertyPane configuration object. And normally the way it's done is you just do a return call and you pass directly kind of a static iProperty pane configuration object. But you could also change your code to say, well, I'm going to create a variable called configuration, and it's going to be an iProperty pane configuration. And then I'm going to actually populate it, and then I'm going to return that configuration at the end of the function. Essentially, I'm doing exactly the same thing that the getPropertyPane configuration method is doing, except that now I can actually do things like manipulate my groups. So for example, the first thing I'm going to do before I return that object, I'm going to get the groups, and I get the first groups in the groups in the first page, and then I'm going to get in my layout group, which is the first group in that first page. And I could have used names, I could have used different approaches like that. What I'm doing here is I'm getting that group. And now what I can do is I can actually add my if statements. And it's actually a lot cleaner in terms of legibility, because what I can do here is I can say, look, if the layout is compact, I'm going to push, right? It's an array of fields. So in TypeScript, you can actually, in JavaScript, you can just do pop and push to modify an array. So I'm just adding my property pane toggle field. And then I'm adding my other property pane toggle fields. And then I do the same thing with the film strip. And then I return my configuration. So that's a very simple way to actually kind of create one of those conditional fields. And by the way, you could do the same thing for conditional field groups and see how I don't have that ugly space anymore. So I don't have to lose sleep. I don't have to feel bad because I've told everybody how to add extra spaces in their web part panes. And that's cool. And that's more than likely the same behavior that Microsoft is using to render the property pane web parts. All right, so next time, what we're going to talk about is we're going to start talking about property pane validation, because now you're asking people to configure web parts. We should always validate the input, again, so that people don't feel stupid, right? Let's show them, hey, you know what, you selected this option, you should have probably entered a value here, or the URL you've just entered is invalid. We're also going to talk about the property pane controls, the PnP property pane controls, and then at a later session, we're going to show you how to build your own property pane controls. We've barely scratched the surface. We haven't even started talking about the content part. That's going to be the most awesome part. But that's it for me for today. Thank you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Vesa, back to you.
Thank you, Hugo. Really, really cool stuff. And those are really, I think these design sessions and discussions are really good because there's a lot of kind of a inspirational thing as well. So considerations, and you're raising really, really great points from a thinking perspective. So let's not just focus on doing things, rather focus why are we doing things and how we can make it better, which is really, really cool. Thank you, Hugo, on that one. Super cool stuff. Now, thank you, Siddharth. Really, really cool web part. Awesome stuff on that one. Looking forward also on the follow-up sequence and follow-up series on that one related on the automation piece. That looked really, really awesome. Thank you, Paolo, as well, and thank you, Hugo, on this one. Just to recap on the recordings. So recording will be available within 24 hours in the Microsoft 365 Community PnP YouTube channel at AKMS M365 PnP videos. If you go to the AKMS M365 PnP blog, you can actually find a summary blog post during that time. So Andrew, we can all wait for the Andrew and say, and thank you, Andrew, for doing such an awesome job on the video recordings. But Andrew is responsible of basically making all of this happen for us within 24 hours. So thank you always for that one. By the way, the recording which you're seeing in the chat always during this course, you cannot access that unless you're internal Microsoft employees. That's just a limitation in the Microsoft Teams right now. And that's why we try to get the recording out always within 24 hours so that everybody can access that as fast as possible. Next week, we'll have the Microsoft 365 General Development Call on January 20th, and the next Viva Connections SPFX call is happening on January 27th. It is pretty soon February. This is crazy. Time flies when you're having fun. Now, we do have quite a few different community calls happening still. So we have the M365 platform call every single Tuesday. Then on Thursdays in this time, we'll have the recurrent calls happening as well, and on top of them we have few individual calls happening as well. Some of these might be again merged. Some of the calls in the future, we'll see how this evolves. We're trying to get you as much as possible valuable material without also confusing you. So your feedback is always important for us on what's needed. But thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you one more time for all of the presenters. Absolutely brilliant job. And thanks everybody for lovely discussion in the chat. It's always good to see that discussion being so lively as it was again on today. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.